The Galactic Council had ruled the known universe for 12,000 years. Nobody questioned their power. Nobody dared to challenge their laws. 17 ancient species sat upon the high circle, and their word was absolute. When they spoke, entire civilizations listened. When they commanded, worlds obeyed. They had crushed rebellions, destroyed empires, and brought peace to three spiral arms of the galaxy through the simple threat of their overwhelming might. For thousands of years, this system worked perfectly. Young species were discovered, evaluated, and placed under protectorate status. They were given rules to follow, limits on their growth, and restrictions on their technology. In return, they received protection and the promise that one day, if they proved themselves worthy, they might join the Council as equals. Most species accepted these terms without complaint. Those who refused learned quickly that resistance was meaningless against the combined military power of 17 starfaring civilizations. The Council's scouts ranged far and wide across the galaxy, always searching for new species to bring into the fold. It was one such scout ship that first detected the radio signals coming from a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star at the edge of the Orion Arm. The signals were primitive, barely capable of reaching beyond their own solar system, but they were unmistakably artificial. Someone was out there, broadcasting into the void, unaware that anyone was listening. The scout ship observed for several months before reporting back to the Council. The species called themselves humans. They were confined to a single world they named Earth, though they had placed small outposts on their moon and a neighboring red planet. Their technology was crude by galactic standards. Their ships could barely reach the edges of their own solar system. They fought among themselves constantly, divided into hundreds of nations that squabbled over resources and ideology. The Council reviewed the report and reached a unanimous decision. Humanity was young, primitive, and potentially dangerous. Their violent nature made them unsuitable for immediate integration into galactic society. They would be placed under strict protectorate status with heavy restrictions on their development. A fleet would be sent to deliver the terms and ensure compliance. Ambassador Velketh of the Serani was chosen to lead the diplomatic mission. And the Serani were one of the oldest species in the Council, known for their wisdom and their skill in bringing young civilizations into the fold. Velketh himself had overseen the incorporation of 37 species over his long career. He had never failed. He did not expect this mission to be any different. His fleet consisted of 200 warships, more than enough to pacify a single world if negotiations failed. The ships were armed with plasma cannons capable of melting continents and kinetic bombardment systems that could crack a planet's crust. Velketh did not anticipate needing such weapons. In his experience, primitive species quickly recognized the futility of resistance when faced with such overwhelming force. The fleet arrived in Earth orbit on a clear spring morning. Across the planet, billions of humans looked up at their sky and saw 200 alien vessels hanging silently among the stars. Panic spread through some regions. Others fell into stunned silence. Military forces around the world went to high alert, their weapons suddenly seeming like toys compared to the massive ships above. Velketh broadcast his message on every frequency the humans used. He spoke calmly and clearly, allowing the translation systems to convert his words into every human language simultaneously. He introduced himself as a representative of the Galactic Council. He explained that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that they were now under the protection of the galaxy's governing body. He requested that Earth's leaders send a representative to discuss the terms of their integration. The response came faster than Velketh expected. Within hours, a small shuttle launched from the planet's surface and approached his flagship. The shuttle was painfully primitive, using chemical propulsion that the Council had abandoned millions of years ago. But Velketh appreciated the gesture. At least the humans were willing to talk. The shuttle docked and a single human emerged. She was a woman of middle age with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that seemed to carry a weight far beyond her years. She wore a simple black uniform with no decorations or medals. She introduced herself as Director Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Initiative. Velketh received her in his private chambers, a gesture of respect he reserved for representatives of promising species. He offered her refreshments, which she politely declined. He invited her to sit, which she did, her posture straight and her expression carefully neutral. Velketh found himself impressed by her composure. Most primitive species sent trembling diplomats who could barely form coherent sentences in the presence of council authority. This woman showed no fear at all. He began his presentation with a brief history of the Galactic Council, explaining its founding, its purpose, and its accomplishments. He showed her holographic displays of the thousands of worlds under council protection, the vast fleets that maintained peace, and the prosperity that came from membership in galactic civilization. He spoke of the benefits humanity would receive as a protectorate species, including access to advanced medicine, clean energy, and protection from hostile forces. Then he explained the terms. Humanity would be granted protectorate status for a period of 500 standard years. During this time, they would be required to disband their military forces beyond a small planetary defense corps. They would be forbidden from developing certain technologies, including faster-than-light travel, artificial intelligence, and weapons of mass destruction. They would be prohibited from expanding beyond their current solar system. Council observers would be stationed on Earth to ensure compliance. Any violation of these terms would result in immediate military intervention. Velketh delivered these terms as he always did, with firm but gentle authority. He had found that this approach worked best with young species. It made them understand that resistance was futile while still offering them a path to a better future. Most species accepted the terms immediately, grateful for the opportunity to join a larger civilization. Director Vasquez listened without interruption. She asked clarifying questions about specific terms, taking notes on a small device she carried. She inquired about the appeals process, the timeline for technology restrictions, and the criteria for advancement to full council membership. Velketh answered each question patiently, pleased that she was engaging with the process constructively. When he finished his explanation, he leaned back in his chair and waited for her response. He expected gratitude, or at least acceptance. What he received was something entirely different. Director Vasquez closed her notebook and looked directly at Velketh. Her expression had not changed throughout the entire presentation, but something in her eyes had shifted. There was a coldness there now, a hardness that made even the ancient Serani feel slightly uncomfortable. She smiled. It was a thin expression, more a movement of muscles than a display of emotion. The translation units struggled to interpret it properly, cycling through several emotional indicators before settling on an inconclusive reading. Ambassador Velketh, she said, her voice calm and measured, I want to thank you for taking the time to explain the Council's position so thoroughly. You have made your terms very clear. Now let me make ours equally clear. She stood slowly, straightening her uniform. You have 72 hours to withdraw your fleet from our solar system. Every ship, every probe, every piece of equipment you have brought with you must be gone within that time. And after the deadline passes, we will consider your continued presence an act of war and respond accordingly. Velketh stared at her for a long moment, certain that his translation units had malfunctioned. No primitive species had ever responded to council terms with threats. It was unthinkable. It was absurd. Director Vasquez, he said carefully, I do not think you understand the situation. The fleet outside your window represents only a tiny fraction of the Council's military power. We have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than yours. We have unmade empires that span thousands of worlds. Your species is confined to a single planet with technology that we abandoned before your ancestors climbed down from the trees. You cannot threaten us. Vasquez did not flinch. She did not look away. She simply stood there, and that cold smile still playing at the corners of her mouth. Ambassador, I understand the situation perfectly. I understand that you have come here expecting us to bow and scrape and beg for mercy. I understand that every other species you have encountered has done exactly that. But you have made a critical error in your assessment of humanity. She took a step closer to him, and despite himself, Velketh found himself leaning back. You looked at our planet and saw a primitive world torn by conflict. You saw our crude ships and our chemical rockets and our petty wars, and you assumed we were weak. You assumed we were afraid. You assumed that we would be grateful for your protection. Her smile widened slightly. You were wrong. She turned and walked toward the door of his chambers. Before she left, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. 72 hours, Ambassador. I suggest you use them wisely. Tell your masters what you have heard here today. Tell them that Earth sends its regards, and tell them that history has a long memory for those who try to put humanity in chains." She left without waiting for a response. Velketh sat in silence for a long time after she departed. He reviewed the conversation in his mind, searching for some indication that she had been bluffing, that her threats were nothing more than the desperate posturing of a cornered species. He found none. She had spoken with the absolute confidence of someone who knew something he did not. For the first time in his long career, Ambassador Velketh felt a flicker of doubt. He reported the conversation to his superiors on the council, expecting them to share his concerns. Instead, they laughed. The idea that a single primitive world could threaten the might of the Galactic Council was absurd on its face. They ordered Velketh to remain in position and prepare for military action if the humans did not accept the terms within the standard compliance period. The fleet stayed where it was. On Earth, life continued in its strange, chaotic way. Some people panicked about the alien ships overhead. Others went about their daily business, trusting their governments to handle the situation. News channels debated endlessly about what the aliens wanted and what humanity's response should be. Protests broke out in some cities, demanding either immediate surrender or immediate resistance. Behind the scenes, far from the public eye, something very different was happening. In a bunker complex buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps, Director Vasquez met with a small group of people who officially did not exist. They were the leaders of the Terran Defense Initiative, a program so secret that fewer than 100 people on Earth knew of its existence. They had been preparing for this moment for over 50 years. Vasquez stood before a massive holographic display showing the positions of every council ship in the solar system. Red dots marked the alien vessels, clustered in a tight formation above Earth. Green dots marked something else entirely, something the council had never detected, something that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. "Status report," she said. A man with graying hair and tired eyes stepped forward. His name was Dr. Marcus Chen, and he was the chief architect of humanity's secret weapons program. "Prometheus is fully operational," he said. "All systems are online and ready for activation. We can neutralize their fleet's electronics within seconds of receiving the order." "Casualties?" Vasquez asked. "Their life support systems will continue functioning on residual power for approximately 6 hours. Long enough for them to understand what has happened. Long enough for them to be afraid." Vasquez nodded slowly. She turned to another figure, a woman in a military uniform covered with stars. "And the Shadow Fleet?" General Sarah Morrison smiled grimly. 47 vessels in position behind the moon, completely undetected. They are ready to move on your command. "The deadline is in 12 hours, Vasquez said. "I do not expect them to withdraw. They are too proud, too certain of their own superiority. They cannot conceive of a universe in which humanity poses a genuine threat." She looked around the room at the faces of the men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment. They are about to learn otherwise. The hours ticked by. The council fleet remained in position, making no move to withdraw. On the flagship, Ambassador Velketh monitored communications from Earth, looking for any sign that the humans were preparing to capitulate. He found only silence. The human governments were not responding to council transmissions. Their military forces had stood down from high alert and returned to normal operations. It was as if they had simply decided to ignore the alien armada in their sky. Velketh did not know what to make of this response. Every other primitive species had spent the compliance period in frantic negotiations, trying to secure better terms, or at least demonstrate their willingness to cooperate. The humans were doing neither. They were simply waiting. As the 72nd hour approached, Velketh felt that flicker of doubt grow stronger. He ordered his fleet to raise shields and charge weapons, just as a precaution. He told himself that it was merely standard procedure, that there was nothing to fear from a species that could barely reach their own moon. He almost believed it. The deadline passed at exactly midnight, Greenwich Mean Time. For a moment, nothing happened. The fleet hung motionless in space, weapons charged, shields raised, waiting for some kind of attack that never seemed to come. And then the lights went out. It happened all at once. With no warning and no explanation. Every system on every ship in the fleet simply stopped working. Navigation screens went dark, weapons powered down, Communications fell silent. Even the emergency lighting flickered and died, plunging the crews into absolute darkness. Ambassador Velketh floated in the blackness of his chambers, feeling his heart's pound with a fear he had never known. He tried to activate his personal communicator, but it was dead. He tried to reach the door controls, but they did not respond. He was trapped in the dark, helpless, at the mercy of a species he had dismissed as primitive. In the distance, through the walls of his ship, he could hear the sounds of his crew crying out in terror. Humanity had warned them. They had not listened. Now they would learn what happened to those who underestimated Earth. The darkness was absolute. Ambassador Velketh had lived for over 3,000 years. He had traveled to the farthest reaches of the galaxy and witnessed wonders that would drive lesser minds to madness. He had stood on the bridge of his flagship during battles that shattered moons and cracked planets. He had never in all those centuries experienced anything like this. The blackness that surrounded him was not merely the absence of light. It was something deeper, something that seemed to press against his skin like cold water. He could hear his own breathing, ragged and fast, echoing in the chamber that had become his prison. He could hear his heart's pounding in his chest, three separate rhythms beating wildly out of sync with each other. He tried to move, but in the zero gravity of the powerless ship, he only succeeded in sending himself spinning slowly through the darkness. His hands found the wall eventually, the cold metal surface his only connection to reality. He clung to it like a drowning creature clinging to driftwood. In the corridors beyond his chambers, he could hear the sounds of his crew. Some were shouting orders that no one could follow. Others were screaming in pure terror. A few were praying to gods that suddenly seemed very far away. The Sorani were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, proud and dignified and utterly unaccustomed to helplessness. The sounds they made now were not dignified at all. Velketh tried to think, tried to analyze what had happened. The Council had encountered electromagnetic pulse weapons before. Some species had developed technology capable of disrupting electronic systems over short ranges, but those weapons were crude, easily countered by proper shielding. The Council ships were protected by the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy, layers upon layers of safeguards designed to keep critical systems operating under any circumstances. None of that mattered now. Whatever the humans had used, it had cut through every defense like a blade through silk. It had reached into the quantum cores of the ship's computers and simply turned them off. It had done this simultaneously to 200 vessels, spread across thousands of kilometers of space. It had done this without any detectable energy signature, without any warning, without any chance to respond. This was not a weapon the Council had ever encountered. And this was not a weapon the Council had ever imagined. Velketh felt the fear growing in his chest, cold and heavy. He had spent his entire career bringing primitive species into the fold, confident in the absolute superiority of Council technology. That confidence had been shattered in a single instant. The humans had done the impossible, and they had done it easily. Time passed, though Velketh had no way of measuring it. Minutes felt like hours in the suffocating darkness. He tried to calm himself, tried to remember his training, tried to believe that rescue would come. The Council would notice when the fleet stopped responding. They would send ships to investigate. Help was surely on the way. But another part of his mind, a part he had never listened to before, whispered a different truth. The Council was far away. When even their fastest ships would take weeks to reach Earth. By then, anything could have happened. By then, they could all be dead. He thought about Director Vasquez, about the cold smile she had worn when she delivered her ultimatum. She had known. She had known exactly what would happen if they stayed. She had warned them, given them every chance to leave, and they had dismissed her as a primitive bluffing with an empty hand. The hand had not been empty at all. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out on every ship. Crews floated in darkness, their training useless against an enemy they could not see or understand. Some tried to reach escape pods, only to find them as dead as everything else. Others attempted to restore power through manual backups, but those systems had failed along with the primary ones. A few tried to breach the hulls and escape into space, preferring a quick death to this slow suffocation in the dark. The life support systems, running on residual power, continued to function at minimum capacity. The air remained breathable, The temperature stayed within acceptable ranges. The humans had calculated their attack precisely. They had left just enough power to keep the crews alive, but nothing more. They wanted the Council forces to experience their helplessness fully. They wanted them to understand exactly how vulnerable they were. 6 hours, Director Vasquez had said. 6 hours of air, 6 hours of darkness, 6 hours to contemplate what it meant to threaten humanity. On Earth, in the bunker beneath the Alps, the mood was quietly triumphant. Director Vasquez stood before the holographic display, and I watching the red dots that represented the Council fleet. The dots had stopped moving, frozen in their orbits like insects trapped in amber. Prometheus performed perfectly, Dr. Chen reported. Complete system shutdown across all 200 vessels. No detected resistance, no countermeasures, no adaptation. Their technology is sophisticated, but it was never designed to defend against something like this. Because nothing like this has ever existed before, Vasquez said softly. Until us. She studied the display for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Around her, the other members of the Terran Defense Initiative exchanged glances of relief and pride. 50 years of work, 50 years of secrecy, 50 years of preparing for a threat they had always known was coming. All of it had led to this moment. Kuma, what about the population? Vasquez asked. How are they reacting? General Morrison pulled up another display showing social media feeds and news broadcasts from around the world. Confusion mostly. The fleet has gone dark, and people are wondering what happened. Some are claiming it is some kind of alien communication technique. Others think the ships have left. The amateur astronomers are going crazy trying to figure out why they cannot get any readings from the vessels. Let them wonder, Vasquez said. For now, we proceed to Phase 2. Is the Shadow Fleet in position? Ready and waiting, Director. Vasquez nodded slowly. She had hoped it would not come to this. When she had delivered her ultimatum to Ambassador Velketh, she had genuinely wanted him to leave. She had wanted the Council to recognize that Earth was not like other worlds, that humanity would not bow to foreign masters, no matter how powerful they seemed. She had wanted peace, or at least the absence of war. But she had known even then that the Council would not listen. They were too old, too set in their ways, too certain of their own superiority. They had spent 12,000 years ruling the galaxy through fear and force, and they could not conceive of a universe in which a young species on a single world might pose a genuine threat. That blindness would cost them everything. Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Show them what we are. Far above Earth, hidden in the shadow of the moon, 47 ships came alive. They were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, long and sleek. Built from materials that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, they seemed to be made of darkness itself. They had no visible weapons, no engine ports, no sensor arrays. They looked less like warships and more like predators, evolved over millions of years to hunt in the black void between stars. These were the ships of the Shadow Fleet, humanity's greatest secret. They had been built in underground shipyards hidden from any orbital observation, constructed using technologies that officially did not exist, crewed by men and women who had given up their identities to serve a cause greater than themselves. For decades, they had waited in silence, running exercises, perfecting their tactics, preparing for the day when Earth would need them. That day had come. The Shadow Fleet moved without sound, without engine flare, and without any of the telltale signs that normally accompanied spacecraft movement. They simply appeared around the Council Armada, emerging from the darkness like ghosts materializing from thin air. Within minutes, they had formed a perfect sphere around the helpless enemy vessels, their weapons trained on targets that could not see them coming. On the flagship, Ambassador Velketh did not know that he was surrounded. He did not know that humanity had ships capable of matching Council technology, or that those ships were now close enough to destroy his entire fleet in seconds. He only knew the darkness and the fear, and the growing certainty that he had made a terrible mistake. Then the lights came back. It happened as suddenly as they had gone out. Emergency lighting flickered to life, casting harsh shadows across the corridors. When her screens blinked and displayed static before slowly returning to normal operation. Velketh heard the hum of systems restarting, the whir of ventilation fans, the beep of equipment running self-diagnostics. He pushed himself toward the bridge, his legs unsteady after hours of floating in zero gravity. Around him, crew members were doing the same, moving through corridors still dark with emergency lighting, their faces pale with shock and exhaustion. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. The bridge was in chaos. Officers were trying to restore full functionality to damaged systems, while others attempted to establish communication with the rest of the fleet. Sensor displays showed nothing but static. Navigation computers were still rebooting. The tactical systems were offline. "Report," Velketh demanded as he entered. His first officer, or a young Serani named Kethvos, turned to face him. The young one's skin had gone pale, the color draining from it in a way that indicated extreme stress. "Ambassador, we are still assessing the damage. Most systems are coming back online, but we have no weapons, no shields, and no faster-than-light capability. Communications are limited to short-range transmissions. We are receiving similar reports from other ships in the fleet." "What happened?" Velketh asked, though he already knew the answer would not be satisfying. "Unknown, Ambassador. Our systems simply stopped. All of them at the same time. We have no record of any attack, no detection of any energy weapon or electromagnetic pulse. It is as if someone reached into our computers and turned them off by hand." Velketh moved to the main viewport and looked out at the stars. And Earth hung below them, beautiful and blue and utterly unconcerned with the chaos its inhabitants had caused. He had come here expecting to bring a primitive world into the fold of galactic civilization. Instead, he had discovered something that terrified him to his core. "Ambassador," another officer called out, "we are detecting contacts, multiple contacts, surrounding the fleet." "On screen," Velketh ordered. The main display flickered and came to life, showing a tactical view of their position. Red dots marked the council ships, still clustered together, still dead in space except for basic life support. But now there were other dots on the screen, green ones, forming a perfect sphere around the Armada. Velketh counted them. 47 ships, each one positioned to cover multiple council vessels with overlapping fields of fire. They had not been there before the blackout. They had appeared from nowhere, like predators emerging from shadows. "Where did they come from?" he breathed. "We detected nothing when we arrived. Our sensors showed no construction facilities, no shipyards, nothing capable of producing vessels like these." "Ambassador," his communications officer interrupted, "we are receiving a transmission, audio only. It is being broadcast to every ship in the fleet simultaneously." "Let me hear it." The speakers crackled, and then a human voice filled the bridge. It was a man's voice, calm and measured, speaking in perfect Serani with no trace of accent. "Attention, Council Fleet. This is Commander James Chen of the Terran Shadow Fleet. Your vessels have been disabled. Your weapons are locked. Your shields are down. You are surrounded by forces capable of destroying your entire armada in approximately 4 seconds." Velketh felt his heart stop. "This is not a threat," the voice continued. "This is a statement of fact. We have demonstrated our capabilities. We have shown you that your technology, advanced as it is, means nothing against ours. We have done this without killing a single member of your crew, because humanity does not desire war. We desire only to be left alone." There was a pause, and when the voice continued, there was something colder in it, something that spoke of ancient anger held in check by immense self-control. "You were warned. Director Vasquez gave you 72 hours to leave our system. You chose to stay. You chose to believe that your weapons and your ships and your ancient authority made you invincible. You were wrong. This is your one act of mercy. Your engines will be restored momentarily. You will leave our solar system and return to your council. You will tell them what you have witnessed here today. You will tell them that Sol is closed to all outside traffic until further notice. Any vessel that enters our space without permission will not receive the courtesy of a warning. They will simply disappear into the dark." "We did not want this," the voice said, and now there was something almost sad in it. "We asked only to be left in peace. You made us into what we are. You and all the others who looked at our world and saw only primitives to be conquered or controlled. Remember that when you tell your masters what happened here. Remember that you created the very thing you now fear." The transmission ended. For a long moment, And no one on the bridge spoke. They stared at their screens, at the green dots surrounding them, at the impossible reality of what had just occurred. The greatest military force the Council had deployed in centuries, humiliated by a species they had dismissed as primitives. "Ambassador," the navigation officer said quietly, "our engines are coming back online. We have basic propulsion capability." Velketh looked at the tactical display one more time. The human ships had not moved. They hung in space like patient predators, waiting to see what their prey would do. He knew with absolute certainty that any aggressive action would be met with instant annihilation. The humans had spared them once. They would not spare them twice. "Set course for the nearest jump point," he ordered. "All ships." "Ambassador, should we not attempt to—" "No." Velketh cut off the protest before it could fully form. "We are leaving. Now." The Council fleet limped away from Earth, their engines struggling to accelerate without full power. Behind them, the human ships remained motionless, watching, waiting. Only when the last Council vessel had crossed the orbital boundary of the outer planets did the Shadow Fleet finally withdraw, disappearing back into the darkness from which they had emerged. Ambassador Velketh stood at the viewport of his damaged flagship and watched the blue dot of Earth grow smaller and smaller in the distance. He thought about Director Vasquez and her cold smile. He thought about the voice on the transmission and the quiet sadness in its final words. "We did not want this. You made us into what we are." When for the first time in 3,000 years, Velketh found himself questioning everything he believed about the galaxy and humanity's place in it. He had come to Earth expecting to bring another primitive species under Council protection. Instead, he had discovered something that made the Council itself seem primitive by comparison. And now he had to go home and explain to the High Circle that their greatest fleet had been defeated without a single shot being fired. He did not know how they would react. He did not know what they would do. He only knew that nothing would ever be the same again, and that the galaxy had just become a much more dangerous place. The stars watched in silence as the Council fleet fled toward home, leaving behind a small blue world that had just announced its presence to the universe in the most dramatic way possible. Earth had spoken, the heavens had listened, and somewhere in the depths of space, the ancient powers that had ruled for millennia began to feel something they had not experienced in thousands of years. Fear. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had stood for 8,000 years. It was carved from the heart of an asteroid, polished until its walls gleamed like black mirrors. 17 thrones of stone and metal rose from the floor in a perfect circle, each one representing one of the elder species that had ruled the galaxy since before most civilizations had learned to use fire. This chamber had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the signing of treaties that shaped the fates of billions, and the declarations of war that had burned across the stars. Today it witnessed something new. Today it witnessed fear. Ambassador Velketh stood in the center of the circle, his body bent in the posture of shame that his species used when delivering terrible news. Around him, the 17 elders sat in silence, their ancient eyes fixed upon him with expressions that ranged from disbelief to barely contained rage. He had been speaking for over an hour, describing every detail of what had happened at Earth. Now he was finished, and the silence that followed was worse than any accusation. Elder Kethmaros of the Dominion was the first to speak. His species was reptilian, covered in scales that had darkened to almost black with his immense age. He was over 4,000 years old, and he had led his people through 3 major wars. He had never lost. "You are telling us," he said, his voice like stones grinding together, "that 200 of our finest warships were disabled by a species that cannot even travel faster than light? That they were surrounded by vessels no one detected? That you fled without firing a single shot?" "Elder, I am telling you the truth," Velketh replied. "Our weapons were locked. Our shields were down. They had us surrounded before we knew they existed. Any attempt at resistance would have resulted in the complete destruction of the fleet." "Impossible," another elder declared. This was Moraveth of the Crystalline Collective, her body a lattice of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. "Our technology is millions of years more advanced than anything these humans possess. What you describe cannot happen." "And yet it did happen." Velketh raised his head, meeting her gaze directly. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. Our systems did not merely fail, they were turned off, all at once, as easily as you might extinguish a candle. Whatever weapon the humans used, it is unlike anything in our records. Unlike anything we have ever encountered. The chamber erupted into argument. Elders shouted over each other, some demanding immediate retaliation, others calling for investigation, still others questioning whether Velketh was telling the truth at all. The noise echoed off the polished walls until the grand chamber sounded like a war zone itself. Finally, one voice cut through the chaos. It was quiet, almost soft, but it carried an authority that silenced everyone else instantly. Nari enough. The speaker was Elder Thakra of the Mindweavers. Her species was small and fragile-looking, with large eyes and delicate limbs that seemed barely capable of supporting her own weight. But appearances were deceiving. The Mindweavers had capabilities that most species could not even comprehend. They could read thoughts across vast distances, influence minds with a whisper, see possibilities that others could not imagine. Thakra herself was the oldest member of the council, her age measured in tens of thousands of years. Ambassador Velketh speaks the truth, she said calmly. I have touched his mind and found no deception. What he describes happened exactly as he says. The humans possess technology we do not understand, weapons we cannot counter, and ships we cannot detect. This is not speculation. And this is fact. The silence that followed was profound. No one questioned the Mindweaver's abilities. If she said Velketh was telling the truth, then he was telling the truth, which meant that everything the Council believed about the universe had just been proven wrong. How is this possible? Elder Moraveth demanded. We surveyed that system extensively. We found nothing to suggest capabilities of this magnitude. Their ships were primitive, their weapons laughable, their technology barely sufficient to reach their own moon. How could they possibly have developed weapons capable of defeating our fleet? Perhaps they hid them, Thakra suggested. Perhaps they knew we were watching and chose to appear weaker than they were. It would not be the first time a species has used deception as a survival strategy. For how long? Kethmaros asked. We have been observing them for decades. Their development has been consistent with normal technological progression for a species of their age. You are suggesting they have secretly built technology millions of years more advanced while pretending to still use chemical rockets? I am suggesting that we know less about this species than we thought we did, Thakra replied, and I am suggesting that we should be very careful about what we do next. The argument began again, but now it had a different tone. The initial disbelief had faded, replaced by a growing realization that the council faced something genuinely dangerous. Some elders still advocated for immediate military action, one arguing that the council could not appear weak in the eyes of the younger species under its protection. Others urged caution, pointing out that sending more ships to Earth might only result in more humiliation. Eventually, a compromise was reached. The council would deploy the 7th Armada, 3,000 ships, the largest military force assembled in over 4,000 years. This was not merely a punitive expedition. This was a statement, a demonstration of overwhelming power that would remind the galaxy who truly ruled the stars. The 7th Armada was the pride of the Council's military. Its flagship was a vessel nearly 10 kilometers long, bristling with weapons capable of destroying entire planets. Its escorts included hundreds of battlecruisers, thousands of fighters, and support ships carrying enough soldiers to conquer 100 worlds. It was the kind of force that had ended wars before they began, simply by arriving in a system and demanding surrender. Fleet Commander Orostai was chosen to lead the expedition. She was a veteran of 3 major conflicts, known for her tactical brilliance and her absolute ruthlessness. She had never lost a battle, never retreated from an enemy, never shown mercy to those who defied the Council's will. If anyone could humble the humans, it was her. The Armada launched within a standard cycle of the Council's decision. 3,000 ships jumped into hyperspace, their destination a small blue world at the edge of the Orion Arm. Commander Orostai stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the stars stretch into lines as they accelerated beyond light speed. She had studied the reports from Ambassador Velketh's expedition. She had analyzed every detail, every sensor reading, every scrap of data that had been collected before the blackout. She did not underestimate the humans, but she also did not fear them. Whatever weapon they had used against the previous fleet, it had clearly required surprise to be effective. This time the council was coming prepared. This time they knew what to expect. Or so she thought. The problems began almost immediately. On the third day of the journey, long-range communications with forward scout ships began failing. At first, the technicians attributed it to normal interference, the kind of static that sometimes affected signals traveling through certain regions of space. But when the second group of scouts went silent, and then the third, Commander Orostai began to suspect something else was happening. "Show me the route," she ordered, standing before the tactical display on her bridge. A holographic map of the galaxy appeared, showing the Armada's path from Council space to Earth. Along that path, red dots marked the positions of scout ships and sensor buoys that should have been reporting back to the fleet. One by one, those red dots were turning black. "Whatever is doing this is staying ahead of us," her tactical officer reported. "It is disabling our forward observers before they can transmit useful data. We are flying blind, Commander." "Can you detect what is causing the failures?" "No, Commander. There is no energy signature, no debris, no indication of what happened. The scouts simply stopped transmitting." Orostai felt a chill run through her body, but she did not let it show. "Continue on course. All ships maintain combat readiness. Whatever is out there, we will deal with it when we arrive." But the strangeness did not stop. As the Armada approached the outer boundaries of the Sol system, navigation systems began reporting errors. Star charts that had been accurate for millions of years suddenly showed impossible configurations. Jump coordinates that should have led to specific points in space instead led nowhere at all. Several ships attempted microjumps to verify their position and found themselves hundreds of thousands of kilometers off course. "Commander," her navigation officer said, his voice trembling slightly, "our systems are being corrupted. Something is rewriting our data in real time. I cannot determine how it is being done." "Then do it manually," Orostai ordered. "We'll use visual confirmation, use astronomical observations. We know where Earth is. We do not need computers to find it." The Armada pressed forward, slower now, more cautious. Every crew member was on edge, watching their screens for any sign of the enemy they knew was waiting. Some whispered that the humans had somehow infected their systems with a virus that could spread faster than light. Others suggested that the humans had technology that could manipulate space itself. No one knew the truth. No one could even guess. And then came the voice. It broadcast on every frequency, in every language the Council used, all at once. It was the same voice that had spoken to Ambassador Velketh's fleet, calm and measured and utterly devoid of fear. "Attention, Galactic Council Armada. You are entering restricted space. What? You have been warned once already that Sol is closed to outside traffic. That warning was not a suggestion. It was not a negotiation. It was a statement of fact." Commander Orostai opened a channel to respond, but the voice continued before she could speak. "We gave your previous fleet mercy. We disabled their ships and let them leave with their lives. We did this because we hoped you would understand that Earth is not like other worlds. We hoped you would choose wisdom over pride. Instead, you sent 3,000 ships to threaten us again." A pause, and when the voice returned, it was colder than before. "We will not give you mercy twice, but we will give you one final chance to turn back. You have exactly 1 hour to reverse course and leave this region of space. If you do not, Hanem, you will learn why humanity was never meant to be conquered." The transmission ended. Commander Orostai stood in silence for a long moment. Around her, her officers waited for orders, their faces pale with uncertainty. She knew what they were thinking. She knew that some of them wanted to turn back, to report to the Council that the humans were too dangerous to engage. She also knew that doing so would end her career and shame her species for generations. "Continue on course," she ordered. "All ships prepare for combat." The hour passed in tense silence. The Armada moved deeper into the Sol system, past the orbits of the outer planets, past the asteroid belt, toward the small blue world that waited in the distance. Sensors strained to detect any sign of the enemy. Weapons charged to full power. Shields hummed with energy. And then the stars began to disappear. It started slowly, so gradually that at first no one noticed. A star here, a star there, blinking out of existence like candles being snuffed. But as more and more vanished, the crews began to realize what was happening. The darkness was spreading, eating the light, consuming everything in its path. "Commander," the sensor officer whispered, "we are being surrounded by something. I cannot determine what it is. It absorbs all energy we send toward it. It reflects nothing. It is as if space itself is turning off." Orstai watched the tactical display as the zone of darkness expanded. It was moving faster now, closing in from all directions, cutting them off from the rest of the universe. Within minutes, the entire armada was enclosed in a sphere of absolute blackness. No light reached them from outside. No signals could penetrate the barrier. They were trapped in a tomb of void. And then the voice returned, one last time. "You didn't listen. We gave you mercy, and you answered with more ships. So now we'll teach you what humanity learned long ago. The universe doesn't care about your authority. It only cares about what you can do." A pause. "And what we can do is turn off the sky." The shell of darkness began to contract. Commander Orostai had faced death many times in her long career. She had stood on bridges of burning ships and commanded fleets outnumbered 10-1. She had never felt fear, not once, not ever. She felt it now. The darkness pressed inward, kilometer by kilometer, inexorable and unstoppable. Hull sensors registered pressure from nothing at all, as if the void itself had become solid and was crushing them in its grip. Crew members screamed. Some tried to fire weapons at the advancing wall, but their shots simply vanished into the blackness without effect. Orostai watched her tactical display as the sphere shrank. She calculated how long they had before the darkness reached them. Minutes, perhaps less. 3,000 ships, the greatest armada in Council history, about to be crushed like insects beneath a boot. She did something then that she had never done before, something that would have been unthinkable just hours ago. She surrendered. "We yield," she broadcast on every frequency, her voice cracking with desperation. "We yield. Please." The darkness paused. The contraction stopped. For a moment that stretched into eternity, nothing happened. And then, like a curtain being drawn aside, the shell opened. Light flooded back into the universe. Stars reappeared in their proper positions. Sensors came alive with data again. But something was different now. Between the armada and the distant glow of Earth's sun, a single human ship waited. It was small, no larger than a council frigate, sleek and black and utterly unthreatening in appearance. Yet somehow its presence was more terrifying than the darkness had been. The transmission that came was audio only, but every word carried weight. "We accept your surrender. Your weapons are locked. Your engines will guide you home. You will deliver a message to your council. Sol is closed. Any ship that enters our space will die in the dark. There are no exceptions. There are no negotiations. There is only this truth." A pause, and the voice softened slightly. "We did not want this. We asked only to be left alone. You made us into what we are. Remember that." Commander Orostai bowed her head. She had never been defeated before. She had never known what it felt like to be so completely outmatched that surrender was the only option. Now she knew, and she suspected that knowledge would haunt her for the rest of her life. The Armada's engines came back online. Only their engines. Every other system remained locked, controlled by the humans who had demonstrated that Council technology meant nothing against their power. Slowly, painfully, 3,000 ships began the long journey home. Behind them, the small human ship remained motionless, watching them go. It would stay there until the last Council vessel had left the system. It would stay there to ensure that no one tried to turn back. Earth had spoken again, and this time, the message was clear beyond any doubt. Do not return. Do not challenge us. Do not make us show you what else we can do. The heavens themselves had turned dark at humanity's command. The Council had sent its greatest weapon, and that weapon had been defeated without a single shot being fired. Whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same. The galaxy had just learned a new truth, one that would reshape everything. There was something in the universe more powerful than the Galactic Council, and that something lived on a small blue world called Earth. The return of the Seventh Armada sent shockwaves through the galaxy that would be felt for generations. 3,000 ships had left council space with great ceremony and absolute confidence. They had been the hammer that would crush humanity's defiance and restore the natural order of the universe. Every species under council protection had watched them depart, secure in the knowledge that the troublesome humans would soon be brought to heel. 3,000 ships returned without their crews. The vessels drifted into council space one by one, their systems locked, their controls unresponsive, their corridors empty and silent. Search teams that boarded them found everything in perfect order: bunks made, equipment stored, personal belongings untouched. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no evidence of what had happened. The crews had simply vanished, as if they had never existed at all. Then the messages began arriving. Across the galaxy, on every neutral station and independent world, the missing crew members appeared. Over 2 million soldiers, technicians, officers, and support personnel, all of them alive and unharmed, all of them with the same story to tell. They spoke of the darkness that had swallowed the stars. They described the crushing pressure of void made solid, the terror of being trapped in a shrinking sphere of nothing. They told of Commander Orostai's surrender and the cold voice that had accepted it, and they repeated word for word the message they had been instructed to deliver. Sul is closed. Any ship that enters dies in the dark. There are no exceptions. The story spread faster than any fleet could travel. It passed from station to station, world to world, species to species. Within weeks, when every civilization in the galaxy knew what had happened, within months, everything had changed. On the council homeworld, in the grand chamber that had stood for 8,000 years, the 17 elders met in emergency session. This time, there was no arguing, no debate, no competing voices demanding different courses of action. There was only silence and the weight of impossible questions. Elder Thakra of the Mindweavers stood before the assembled leaders. Her small form seemed even more fragile than usual, bent under the burden of knowledge that no one wanted to hear. "I have spent the past months studying every scrap of data we have collected about humanity," she said. "Every survey report, every cultural analysis, every technological assessment. I have touched the minds of those who returned from the Armada, experienced their memories firsthand, and I have reached a conclusion that I must share with you, though it brings me no pleasure." She paused, her large eyes moving from face to face around the circle of thrones. "We were wrong about everything." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "The humans did not develop this technology recently," Thakra continued. "They did not hide it from our surveys. They built it openly, in plain sight, and we simply did not recognize what we were seeing." "Explain," Elder Kethmeros demanded. "Their species has been studying physics and mathematics for only a few centuries. In that time, they have advanced from basic mechanics to quantum theory, from simple chemistry to manipulation of atomic forces. We looked at this progress and judged it unremarkable, on the normal development path of any technological species. But their approach was different from ours. Where we learned to harness the forces of nature, they learned to understand them. Where we built machines that used energy, they built machines that questioned what energy truly was. They did not simply advance along the same path we followed, they found a different path entirely." She touched a control, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed complex mathematical equations, theoretical models, experimental data. "This is the foundation of their technology. They call it unified field theory. It describes how all the forces of the universe, gravity, electromagnetism, the nuclear forces, are actually different expressions of a single underlying reality. By understanding this reality at its deepest level, they learn to manipulate it directly. Their weapons do not generate energy. They do not fire projectiles or project fields. They simply change the rules by which the universe operates. They can alter the constants that govern physics itself. They can make light stop traveling. They can make space behave like solid matter. They can, quite literally, turn off the sky." The silence that followed was the most profound the Grand Chamber had ever known. The elders stared at the equations on the display, equations that most of them could not even begin to understand, and felt their ancient certainties crumbling to dust. How is this possible? Elder Moraveth whispered. We have been studying the universe for millions of years. How could a species that has barely reached the stars understand things we have never even conceived? Thakura's expression was sad, almost pitying. Because they asked different questions, she said. We asked how to use the universe. They asked what the universe was. We built bigger ships and more powerful weapons. They built instruments that could peer into the fabric of reality itself and see the truth beneath the surface. And there is something else, something that may be even more important. She changed the display, showing images from human history, wars, disasters, plagues, genocides, the long, bloody record of a species that had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times over. We looked at their conflicts and judged them primitive. We saw their violence and assumed they were not ready for galactic civilization, and we were wrong about that too. Their violence was not a sign of weakness. It was a crucible. Every war, every catastrophe, every near-extinction event forced them to adapt, to innovate, to become something stronger than before. They learned to survive because they had no choice. They learned to fight because fighting was the only way to continue existing. And most importantly, they learned to fear. Not the kind of fear that paralyzes, but the kind that motivates. They knew deep in their collective consciousness that the universe was a dangerous place. They knew that threats could come from anywhere, at any time. So they prepared. For centuries, they prepared for enemies they had never met, dangers they could only imagine. When our scouts first detected their world, they had already been waiting for us for generations. Some of their hidden ships, their impossible weapons, their technology that should not exist, all of it was built for this moment. All of it was built to ensure that no one, no matter how powerful, could ever threaten their existence again. Thakura turned off the display and faced the council directly. We cannot defeat them, she said simply, not with our current capabilities, perhaps not ever. Their understanding of physics is fundamentally more advanced than ours. Every weapon we develop, they will counter. Every ship we build, they will disable. Every strategy we devise, they will anticipate. Then what do? Kethamros demanded. Simply accept that a primitive world has humiliated us? Allow every species in the Protectorate to see that the Council can be defied without consequence? We accept reality, Thakura replied. That is what we do. We acknowledge that we encountered a species more powerful than ourselves and chose not to pursue further conflict. We present it not as defeat, but as wisdom. We tell the galaxy that the Council recognizes Earth as a sovereign power worthy of respect. And if the other species do not believe us, if they see this as weakness, Thakura's expression hardened slightly, then they will learn the same lesson we did. The humans have made their position clear. They do not want war. They do not want conquest. They want only to be left alone. Any species foolish enough to challenge them will face the same fate we did, or worse. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, there was no real choice. The Council could not fight an enemy it could not defeat. It could not project strength it did not have. All it could do was accept the new reality and try to maintain what power it still possessed. The official statement was carefully worded to preserve as much dignity as possible. The Council declared that it had conducted a thorough assessment of Earth's capabilities and concluded that the humans were a mature species deserving of full sovereignty. The protectorate status previously offered was withdrawn. Earth would be recognized as an independent power, free to develop as it chose, subject to no external authority. No one was fooled. Everyone knew what had really happened. The mighty Galactic Council had been defeated by a single world, and there was nothing they could do about it. On Earth, the news was received with quiet satisfaction. And Director Vasquez stood before the holographic display in the Swiss bunker and watched the Council's announcement play on screens across the galaxy. Around her, the members of the Terran Defense Initiative allowed themselves small smiles of triumph. "It is done," she said softly. "We are free." Dr. Chen nodded, but his expression was troubled. "For now. But what comes next? We have revealed ourselves to the galaxy. We have demonstrated capabilities that no one knew we possessed. How long before someone tries to steal our secrets? How long before the Council decides that leaving us alone is more dangerous than attacking us again?" "They will not attack again," Vasquez replied. Not directly. They learned their lesson. But you are right that we cannot simply rest on our achievement. We must remain vigilant. We must continue to develop. And we must be prepared for whatever comes next. She turned to face the others. This was never about defeating the Council. It was about securing our future, about ensuring that humanity would never again be vulnerable to those who would control or destroy us. We have accomplished that goal, but our work is not finished. It will never be finished. As long as there are stars in the sky and threats in the darkness, Earth must be ready. That is the price of survival. That is the cost of freedom. General Morrison stepped forward. What about the other species? The ones under Council protection? Many of them have been watching what we did. Some of them might be inspired to seek their own independence. Vasquez considered this for a moment. We will not interfere. We will not encourage rebellion or support revolutionary movements. When that is not our place, but neither will we allow the Council to use force against species that simply want to be free. If anyone tries to do to others what they tried to do to us, they will find that the darkness can reach very far indeed. Across the galaxy, the effects of Earth's victory began to spread like ripples in a pond. Species that had accepted protectorate status without question began to wonder if perhaps they had other options. Civilizations that had been quietly building their own capabilities looked at what humanity had accomplished and saw a path forward. The Council's grip on power, unquestioned for 12,000 years, began to loosen. Some species approached Earth directly, seeking alliances or trade agreements. They were politely refused. The humans had no interest in building an empire or competing with the Council for influence. They wanted only what they had always wanted, to be left alone to develop in their own way, on their own terms. Others tried different approaches. Spies and saboteurs attempted to infiltrate Earth's systems, hoping to steal the secrets of humanity's technology. They disappeared without a trace, swallowed by a security apparatus that had been perfected over decades of preparation. A few desperate fools even tried direct attacks, hoping that a surprise strike might succeed where the Council's armada had failed. They learned the truth of the warning that had been given. Sul was closed. Any ship that entered died in the dark. Years passed. The galaxy slowly adjusted to the new reality. The Council continued to exist, but its power was diminished. Its authority questioned, its future uncertain. Species that had once trembled at the thought of defying the elders now bargained as equals. The old order was crumbling, and no one knew what would replace it. On Earth, life continued much as it always had. The existence of the Terran Defense Initiative remained secret from the general public. Most humans went about their daily lives unaware that their world had just defeated the greatest military power in the galaxy. They worked and played and loved and died, just as their ancestors had for thousands of years. But in hidden bunkers beneath the surface, in shipyards carved into asteroids, in laboratories where the boundaries of physics were pushed ever further, humanity continued to prepare. The next threat might not come for a century or a millennium or 10 millennia, but it would come eventually. The universe was vast and old and full of dangers that even the Council had never imagined. When that threat arrived, Earth would be ready. Director Vasquez stood at the viewport of an observation station in high orbit, watching the blue and white marble of her homeworld turn slowly below. She was old now, her hair fully gray, her body weakened by years of stress and sacrifice. She knew she would not live to see the next great challenge that humanity would face. But she had done her part. She had helped build the foundation that would protect her species for generations to come. She had stared into the eyes of those who would have enslaved her world and watched them blink. "We did not want this," she murmured, echoing the words that had been broadcast to the Council fleet so many years ago. But we were ready for it. We will always be ready." Behind her, the Shadow Fleet maintained its silent vigil, watching the stars for any sign of danger. Around her, the systems that protected Earth hummed with quiet power, ready to darken the heavens at a moment's notice. Humanity had sent a message to the universe, written in darkness and fear. Do not threaten us. Do not try to control us. Do not make us show you what we can become. The universe for now was listening. 50 years had passed since the day humanity made the heavens go dark. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Of the 17 elder species that had once ruled with absolute authority, only 11 remained active participants. The others had withdrawn from galactic affairs, retreating to their homeworlds to contemplate their diminished place in the universe. The protectorate system had collapsed entirely. Species that had once accepted council rule without question now demanded negotiations as equals. Some formed their own alliances and trade networks, bypassing the council entirely. Others simply declared independence and dared anyone to stop them. No one did. The memory of what had happened to the Seventh Armada was still fresh, even after 5 decades. On the council homeworld, in a chamber that had once witnessed the rise and fall of empires, Elder Kethmaros sat alone. He was very old now, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His scales had faded to pale gray, and his movements were slow and careful. But his mind remained sharp, one endlessly replaying the events that had led to the council's downfall. He had spent years studying humanity, trying to understand how a species so young could have accomplished the impossible. He had read their literature, watched their entertainment, analyzed their history. He had come to know them better than any other member of the council, and what he had learned disturbed him deeply. The door to his chamber opened, and a younger Dominion entered. This was Kethvos, his great-grandchild, a rising member of the diplomatic corps. The young one had just returned from a mission that would have been unthinkable 50 years ago. "You asked to see me, Elder?" Kethvos said, bowing respectfully. "Yes. Tell me about Earth." Kethvos straightened, his expression thoughtful. "It is. Not what I expected. Their world is beautiful. Blue oceans, odd green forests, white clouds. Their cities are chaotic but full of life. And the people themselves are—" He paused, searching for the right words. "They are kind. They welcomed me with hospitality and curiosity. They showed me their art, their music, their history. They answered my questions honestly and asked many of their own. There was no hostility, no arrogance, no sign of the power that defeated our greatest fleet." Kethmaros nodded slowly. "That is what disturbs me most about them. They do not act like conquerors. They do not demand tribute or submission. They simply exist, living their lives as if nothing has changed, as if they did not humble the most powerful civilization in the galaxy." "Perhaps that is because they never wanted to humble us," Kethvos suggested. "When everything I learned suggests that they genuinely desired only to be left alone. They built their weapons not for conquest, but for survival. They developed their technology not to rule the stars, but to protect their home. And yet they built the darkness. They created a weapon that can turn off the sky itself. Does that not concern you?" Kethvos considered the question carefully before answering. "It concerns me, yes, but I also understand why they did it. Do you know what I found most fascinating about human history, Elder? It is not their wars or their achievements or their technological progress. It is how many times they nearly destroyed themselves." He began to pace the chamber, his tail swishing with agitation. "They developed weapons capable of ending all life on their planet before they had even left their own atmosphere. They poisoned their air and water and earth through carelessness and greed. They fought wars over territory and resources and ideology that killed millions of their own kind. Again and again, they came to the edge of extinction, and again they pulled themselves back. By all logic, they should not have survived. Any other species with their capacity for self-destruction would have wiped themselves out long before reaching the stars. But they did not. They endured. They learned. They became something that could not be destroyed because they had already faced destruction so many times." Kethmaros listened in silence, his ancient eyes fixed on his descendant. "When our scouts first found them," Kethvos continued, "they saw a divided world full of conflict and assumed it was weakness. Yet they did not understand that every conflict had made the humans stronger. Every war had taught them new ways to fight. Every disaster had taught them new ways to survive. We looked at their crude rockets and primitive technology and saw a species still learning to walk. We did not see the truth, that they had been preparing for us, or someone like us, for generations. They knew that someday someone would come from the stars. They knew that whoever came might not be friendly, so they got ready. The darkness they created, the weapon that turned off the sky, that was not built to destroy us. It was built to make sure that destruction would never be necessary. They wanted us to see their power and choose to leave. They wanted to teach us fear so that fear would prevent war. And it worked. In 50 years, when not a single ship has violated Earth's space, not one attack has been attempted, the humans achieved through a single demonstration what the Council could not accomplish in 12,000 years of military force: true peace. Kethmaros was silent for a long moment. Then he let out a sound that might have been a laugh, though it contained no humor. "You admire them." "I do," Kethvos admitted. "Not for their power, though that is impressive. I admire them because they chose not to use it. They could have destroyed our fleet. They could have marched across the galaxy, conquering world after world with technology we cannot match. Instead, they sent our soldiers home safely and asked only to be left alone. That is not the behavior of a species that wants to dominate. That is the behavior of a species that understands the cost of war better than anyone else in the galaxy." The old elder rose slowly from his seat and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of the council capital glittered against the darkness of space. Once this view had filled him with pride. Now it only reminded him of how much had been lost. "I have spent 50 years trying to understand where we went wrong," he said softly. "I have analyzed every decision, every assumption, every action that led to our defeat. And I have finally reached a conclusion." He turned to face his descendant. "We failed because we forgot what it meant to be young. We had ruled for so long, faced so few challenges, that we could not imagine a universe where our authority meant nothing. We looked at the humans and saw only what they lacked, not what they possessed. We saw their primitive technology and assumed they were primitive themselves. We did not see their determination, their creativity, their absolute refusal to submit to forces beyond their control. We did not see that the same qualities that made them dangerous to themselves also made them dangerous to anyone who threatened them. And most importantly, we did not see that the universe does not care about age or authority or tradition. It only cares about what you can do and what you are willing to do to survive." He placed a hand on Kethvos' shoulder. "Learn from our mistakes. When you encounter a new species, do not judge them by what they have built. Ask instead what they have survived. Ask what drives them, what they fear, what they love. Because a species that has faced extinction and chosen to fight rather than die will always find a way to win, no matter how primitive they may seem." The lesson was shared across the remaining council worlds, not as an official decree, but as a story passed from elder to younger, a warning for future generations. Do not underestimate those who have survived great trials. Do not assume that power comes only from technology or numbers or age. And never ever try to conquer a species that has learned to conquer itself. On Earth, the anniversary of the 7th Armada's defeat was not celebrated publicly. Most humans still had no idea what their world had accomplished. They lived their lives in peaceful ignorance, unaware that they slept safely only because their planet was protected by weapons that could darken the stars themselves. Sure, but in certain places, among certain people, the day was remembered. In the bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, now expanded into a vast underground complex, the leaders of the Terran Defense Initiative gathered to honor those who had made their victory possible. Director Elena Vasquez had died 15 years ago, peacefully in her sleep, her life's work complete. Her portrait hung in the main hall of the complex, alongside images of the other founders who had sacrificed everything to keep humanity safe. Young officers who had never known them studied their faces and tried to imagine what it must have been like to build a secret defense force capable of humbling a galactic empire. The current director was a woman named Maya Chen, granddaughter of the Dr. Marcus Chen, who had designed the Prometheus system. She stood before the assembled staff and spoke words that had become traditional on this day. 50 years ago, humanity faced a choice. We could submit to those who would control us, accept our place as primitives in a galaxy we did not understand, or we could stand and fight and show the universe what we were capable of. We chose to stand, not because we wanted war, but because we understood that freedom is never given freely. It must be earned and defended and protected against all who would take it away. Today, we remember those who made that stand possible, the scientists who developed technologies that should not exist, the soldiers who served in secrecy, never receiving recognition for their courage. The leaders who made impossible decisions under unimaginable pressure. They gave us our future. Honan, we honor them by protecting it. The gathered officers raised their glasses in silent salute. Then they returned to their work, monitoring the systems that kept Earth safe, watching the stars for any sign of danger. The Shadow Fleet still maintained its vigil, though the ships had been upgraded many times since the original confrontation. New vessels joined the force each year, crewed by men and women who had devoted their lives to a cause most of humanity would never know existed. They trained constantly, preparing for threats that might never come, ready to darken the heavens again if the need arose. Far across the galaxy, Ambassador Velketh of the Sorani lived out his final days in quiet contemplation. He had never fully recovered from the shock of that first encounter with humanity. The experience had broken something inside him. Ace shattered the certainties that had sustained him through thousands of years of life. He spent his remaining time writing, trying to capture what he had learned. His memoirs were passed from scholar to scholar, studied by those who wanted to understand what had happened and why. His final words became famous throughout the council worlds, quoted by philosophers and strategists alike. We looked at humanity and saw what they had built: crude ships, primitive weapons, a divided world torn by conflict. We saw these things and judged them weak, unworthy of respect, fit only to serve as another conquest in our endless expansion. We should have looked deeper. We should have asked not what they had built, but what they had survived. A species that crawls from extinction again and again, a that nearly destroys itself a dozen times and still reaches for the stars. That species does not know how to surrender. It only knows how to wait and prepare and become something that can never be threatened again. We taught them that the universe was hostile. We showed them that other civilizations would try to control or destroy them. We confirmed their darkest fears about what awaited them among the stars. We should not have been surprised when they became the very thing the universe learned to fear. He died shortly after completing his memoirs, the last of those who had witnessed humanity's first contact with the Council. His writings became required reading for every diplomatic trainee in the galaxy, a reminder of what happened when ancient powers forgot to respect those younger and hungrier than themselves. The years continued to pass. The galaxy evolved and changed. New species arose, old ones faded, alliances formed and dissolved like clouds in the wind. Through it all, Earth remained constant, a small blue world at the edge of the Orion Arm, closed to outside traffic, wrapped in a silence that no one dared to break. Occasionally, a ship would stray too close to the Sol system, either through accident or foolish curiosity. Most received a warning transmission that sent them fleeing back the way they had come. A few, the truly stubborn or stupid ones, pressed forward anyway. They were never seen again. Their ships were found later, drifting empty at the edge of the system, their crews deposited safely on distant stations with no memory of what had happened. The message was always the same: Sol is closed, do not return. Some theorists speculated about what other weapons humanity might have developed in the decades since their first demonstration. If they could turn off the sky in one encounter, what else might they be capable of now? The theories ranged from the plausible to the fantastic, but no one ever tested them. No one wanted to find out. On Earth, humanity continued to grow and change. They expanded their settlements on the Moon and Mars. They built stations in the asteroid belt and sent probes to the outer planets. They developed new technologies and made new discoveries, advancing at a pace that would have seemed miraculous to their ancestors. But they did not leave their solar system. They did not join the galactic community or seek alliances with other species. They remained within their borders, content to develop in their own way, and on their own terms. Some called this isolation foolish. Others called it wise. The humans themselves said nothing. They simply continued to exist, to grow, to prepare for whatever the future might bring. 100 years after the Seventh Armada's defeat, a delegation from a coalition of younger species requested permission to visit Earth. They were not seeking alliance or trade or technology. They simply wanted to see the world that had changed everything, to understand the people who had taught the universe to fear. After long deliberation, permission was granted. A small group of diplomats from 6 different species traveled to Earth under heavy escort. They spent a month on the planet, guided by human hosts who showed them the wonders of the world. They saw the great cities with their soaring towers and ancient monuments. They walked through forests and climbed mountains and swam in warm blue oceans. They ate human food and drank human wine and listened to human music. They talked with human philosophers and scientists and artists, trying to understand the minds that had conceived of weapons that could darken the stars. What they found surprised them. The humans they met were not the cold, calculating warriors they had expected. They were warm and curious and endlessly diverse. They argued passionately about things that seemed trivial and cooperated effortlessly on things that seemed impossible. They laughed easily and cried openly and loved fiercely, their emotions as powerful as their technology. They were, in short, a species very much like any other, full of contradictions and complexities, capable of great good and great evil, was struggling to find meaning in a universe that often seemed indifferent to their existence. When the delegation returned home, they were asked to report on what they had learned. Their answer was simple. The humans are not monsters. They are not gods. They are simply people who learned long ago that the universe would not protect them, so they learned to protect themselves. They built their weapons not out of cruelty or ambition, but out of fear. Fear that everything they loved could be taken from them. Fear that all they had built could be destroyed. Fear that their children might grow up in a universe where they were not free. That fear drove them to create things that should not exist, to develop technologies that defy our understanding, to become something that the galaxy had never seen before. But the fear did not make them cruel. It made them careful. They do not want to rule the galaxy. They do not want to destroy the Council or any other civilization. They want only what every species wants, to survive, to grow, to live in peace. The difference is that they are willing to do anything, anything at all, to ensure that survival. And that is why they are feared, not because of what they have done, but because of what everyone knows they are capable of doing. The report was studied and debated, and eventually filed away with all the other analyses of humanity, but its conclusion echoed through the decades that followed, shaping how other species thought about the strange world that had changed everything. Do not threaten them. Do not try to control them. Leave them alone and they will leave you alone. But never forget what they are. Never forget what they can do. Never forget that the species that turned off the sky is still out there, watching, waiting, ready to darken the heavens again if the need arises. Earth's wrath had darkened the heavens once. The Council's authority had meant nothing against it, and the galaxy had learned, too late, that some worlds are better left alone. In the end, that was humanity's greatest victory. Not the defeat of the Armada, not the collapse of the Protectorate, not the fear they had instilled in civilizations millions of years older than themselves. Their greatest victory was simply this. They had earned the right to exist on their own terms. They had proven that they could not be conquered, could not be controlled, could not be dismissed or ignored. They had taken their place among the stars, not as subjects or allies or enemies, but simply as themselves. A small blue world with a very big stick, asking only to be left in peace. And the universe, wise at last, had learned to respect that request. The story of Earth became a legend, passed down through the ages, told and retold in countless variations across countless worlds. It was a warning and a lesson, and for some, an inspiration. It was the story of a species that refused to bow. It was the story of a world that would not break. It was the story of Earth's wrath and the darkness it brought to the heavens, and the Council that learned too late what it meant to threaten humanity. And though the details changed with each telling, the ending was always the same. Do not make them show you what they can become, because they will, and you will not like what you see.